Welcome to Talking Time, the podcast where we talk to amazing people behind Britain's watches. I'm Katya, I work for the Alliance, and here with me we've got Ricky, who has his own very, very successful podcast, Scottish Watches. Hey Ricky, how are you doing?
Not too bad. I mean, it passes the time, I suppose, doing that little thing there. But we've got with us today somebody that's even more famous than me, or you, or us both added together. We've got with us the co-founder, not only of the Alliance, but a small watch brand that does like a couple hundred pieces a year. Christopher Ward, heard of them?
I haven't, no.
No? Oh, you're about to. They're going to hit it big, I think. Mike, how's it going? Not spoken to you in a long while.
We were just saying when we were, it's been a while. And congratulations, by the way, on the achievement of Scottish Watches, because to become the world's number one podcast in watches is no small feat. So we'll take that as another win for Britain.
Yes, and I'll let you have that, even though I would usually say Scotland.
I know you would. That's why I nearly said England, but
oh, what is it that happens when somebody from England wins in a sporting tournament? Well done, England. When someone from Scotland wins, well done, Britain. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, we all love Andy Murray at the moment.
Yes,
one of the best Brits out.
Of course.
So, Mike, you've had a very successful year with Christopher Ward. What were the highlights?
Oh, good question. Yeah, it's been a full-on year. That's for sure. Probably the biggest highlight, if I'm honest, came back at the end of October when we launched the C1 Bel Canto, which, for whatever reason, and obviously I've got some thoughts on that, as no doubt you and Ricky will. It captured the imagination of an awful lot of people, and the two limited editions sold out very, very quickly, which then led us to launch 4 new colours as open series back in January, and they have been a stunning success. And so we are now in the process of working out how a little old watch brand, British watch brand, changes the face of the manufacture of this sort of quality of watch in the volumes that we need to do it in. And so innovation comes in all sorts of ways, doesn't it? But actually, what we working with our colleagues in Beale, and especially Ewald Bader Senior, who has a lifetime in watch manufacture. It's a while since I've seen him quite so motivated. Here's a man who invested, and he'll be quick to tell anybody who wants to listen, invested very early on in Tesla. He's a really interesting guy, is York, and has his finger on lots of technological pulses, and is always looking to break down barriers and move things forward. And he, even before anybody else almost realized that Elon, the great Elon, was onto something a bit special. But he is the guy who is spearheading the charge to really turn a very specialist a watch that nobody's ever really done anything of this ilk in anything other than dozens of pieces before into literally thousands. And it's one of our greatest challenges, and one of the most exciting things I think we've ever been involved with. It's really, really very, very interesting. So as well as the Bel Canto itself having caught the imagination of lots of people, it's also leading to some really creative innovations and relationships in terms of its manufacture. So fascinating period, really fascinating.
Did you ever think it could have been a damp squib? Because the sonnerie of a Christopher Ward, it's not something people would usually associate, and it was completely out of your normal wheelhouse. You like your concepts, you like your sci-fi stuff.
Yeah.
This was different. Did you ever think it would fail?
Always part of me somewhere in this small brain of mine thinks there's something could easily go wrong. So you never take anything for granted. But there was a moment when I think we knew we had probably something very special on our hands. We were at the wind-up show in New York back in October, and although we weren't showing the Bel Canto, which wasn't launched until a week or so after wind-up, we did take a couple of models with us to show people, because some of our customers were flying in, from all over the States to come and see us in New York, and so we wanted to give them a special preview. One of our customers flew in from Texas, and actually, he didn't know we were going to show him the bel canto, but he'd heard about this watch that was coming. And so I was talking to him. I said, look, would you like to see it? And he said, well, I'd love to. So I showed him the bel canto, and literally he was speechless to begin with. And we were a bit concerned about him. He was quite garrulous beforehand, but he was rendered speechless. And then, and this is not a word of a lie, I don't think I'd embarrass him if he ever listens to this, and recognizes who he is. But, a small tear started forming. And the reason was, he's not a pauper by any means, but not a hugely, not what you'd describe as a high net worth individual. Told him how much it was going to be, and he knew because it was us, and he knows us, that it was going to be accessible. I don't think he'd ever thought he would ever own a watch like the bel canto, and it was such an emotional moment for him that it really seriously brought a tear to his eye. So that was a sort of a really interesting and profound moment for us. But then word got around the show that we were showing the bel canto, and there's no better sort of commendation when your professional peers are wanting to purchase a watch and of yours, and the number of people who were also showing at the show who have wanted to buy one there and then, we couldn't sell them there and then to them, but put their names down, was quite staggering. And even those who didn't, many of them made a beeline to our stand, wanted to see it, and we're just very, very generous in the praise of the watch. And so we knew then that it was probably going to be pretty good. Did we expect the first 300 to sell out in 7 hours? No. Did we expect the second 300 to sell out in 2.5 hours? No. Seriously, no. And did we expect the numbers that we're now manufacturing to be the case? No. And I've been, as you know, I've been around a while, and I've been in a number of different sectors, from fashion to homewares to toys. And I've been involved in probably on half a dozen occasions, a product that suddenly takes a life of its own, has a life of its own, has a momentum that you almost is unpredictable, and just has its own sort of life force. And this is one of those moments, and you don't get them that often in your life. So, I'm very grateful that we have this. When we don't take it at all for granted, and I'm profoundly proud of the team who created it. So it's a good moment for us. But as I say, I generally like to keep paranoia at the forefront, because you just never know when things are going to. Yeah, exactly, Ricky. You know that. That's life. But it is nice on occasions to enjoy the moment.
Well, this is the first Christopher Ward release where I have had diehard Rolex aficionados contacting me. Hey Ricky, you work with those Christopher Ward people, don't you? Can you get me one of those bel canto things?
Yeah,
that's a genuine conversation I had with somebody.
Right? Yeah.
And I said no chance, absolutely none.
Yeah,
and you're talking about the way that watch, it shot into the stratosphere, not just within our little realm, because we deal with the independents, obviously, through this new podcast that we're launching today. This is to highlight and push forward British watchmaking. But in my other job, where I wear another hat working with Scottish watches, we like to take the independents, the guys that are doing it their own way, and propelling them forward. I've not seen anything like this. It's almost like the independent version of the Moon Swatch. Everybody was clamouring for it, and then different colours came out, and they were just as successful, just as popular, right to this moment.
Yeah, I mean, we're they're selling every day. We're now out to pre-orders for February 24. People are paying a deposit and putting their names down. There is a limit to how many of these we can manufacture, even doing what we're doing. And the demand hasn't slowed, even though it's now out to February 24, and shortly we'll be out to March 24.
Well, for the people that don't know the spec and the details, who have just heard the name, can you give us a quick run through on the watch?
Sure. I mean, the C1 bel canto is perhaps appropriately named. I mean, it's a chiming watch. It's the French call it a sonnerie au passage, which means that it chimes on the hour every hour. Unless you switch it off, we have an on-off button. And the thing that, as you know, Ricky and Katya, chiming watches are not de rigueur. They're not everywhere. They're fairly niche in terms of the number of people who create them. So that was probably a surprise for us as much as anybody else that we ended up creating it. And the guy who deserved most of the credit, there are several. I mean, the design team have done an amazing job, and I'll talk about the design in a second. But our technical director, Frank Stelzer, is the guy I think who really deserves the biggest pat on the back, if you like, because it was Frank who, in one of those sort of eureka moments, I think, the sort of eureka moment that if I lay in the bath for the next 40 years, I probably wouldn't have. He worked out in his head one day that our caliber JJ01 jumping hour watch had within it the capacity, with the addition of a mere 50 additional components, to be turned into a watch that had a chiming function that the power could be sent to a hammer, which would then hit a gong, which would then create a chime. And so that was a piece of lateral thinking that few people have, and ever grateful to Frank for that.
Getting technical on that subject there, I'm thinking with a jumper, there seems to be a build-up of torque and then it's instantaneously released. And instead of flicking a disc round or whatever, you're then impacting the hammer onto the gong.
That's exactly right. And Johannes Janke, who is our master watchmaker, who initially developed, albeit alongside Frank, developed the jumping hour, created a really interesting jumping hour complication, and the module that sits above the SW200, which, because what he wanted to create, and we wanted him to create, was the most accurate jumping hour in existence. And he did that, actually. I mean, we currently don't have it in the collection, although we recently did a collaboration with Nicholas at Fears for the Alliance, which maybe we'll talk about Katya at some point. And that's the first time the jumping hour has been seen in the wild, if you like, for a good period of time. But it's the way in which it captures the power over the course of the hour. He wanted it to be not all in one go, but very gradually. And therefore, he created a really accurate jumping hour. So it changes precisely on the hour. If you look at most jumping hour complications, they're always a few seconds out either way. This goes absolutely on the hour. And so it was Johannes's sort of cleverness in creating that led to the possibility, an easier possibility of transferring that power into a hammer to hit a gong. But it was really Frank who had that lateral thought that allowed it to happen. There's no question about that. And then beyond that, I mean, we, as you know, Ricky, we create nearly all of the watches and have done for many years for Meistersinger. And we created, when the very first bel canto, although it wasn't called a bel canto, I think it was called Bellora for Meistersinger, we produced for them. And the movement was hidden beneath a dial, and therefore the chiming complication, which at that stage wasn't particularly attractive, it didn't need to be because it was underneath the dial. We decided we wanted to create our own rather than just create it for Meistersinger. But this is where things began to get interesting, to use one word, and complicated to use another, which is we wanted to show the interesting parts of the complication above the platine. So not a dial. The watch has a platine. So the colored part, the plate, has, as you know, most dials have the movement attached underneath. So you've got lots of parts of the movement attached to the dial. Here we had several elements of the movement above the platine, above the dial, if you like, and then the stuff that is not so interesting underneath. And yes, that was thought one, and to some extent, inspired by Max Bousset legacy machines, etc. That sort of look. That's easy to say, very much more difficult to achieve, especially when you've already, Frank's already worked long and hard to create this original bel canto movement, and we come along and the design team come on and say, well, actually, Frank, what we'd like is like the hammer here, we are the gongs of we'd like this part and that wheel and the gear chain we'd like centrally. Any problems? Well, only about 18 months worth, And so, every time because we wanted the aesthetic to be beautiful, and to warrant the name and to warrant the noise, if you like, the sound that it made, and for it to be something really desirable. as well as the chime. And so that's what the design team wanted. That's what I wanted. Frank was probably, as an engineer, less interested, it has to be said, in aesthetics, more interested in the way things work. So we gave him the most incredible headaches. There were some real arguments to which I was ultimately the referee because, we were causing him such pain because every time you move even a small screw, it requires a lot of things to change. But ultimately, after 18 months of blood, sweat, and literally some tears, we got to the end game, which is, I think, I'm not going to be falsely modest about it because, it is a beautiful looking piece and really well balanced. And that sort of symmetry was which we all love in terms of watches. It is symmetrical as best it can be given the various different parts and has its beauty through that symmetry. But to get to that symmetry was a real labor of love and not absence of a few intense arguments from time to time. The watch is really a story. I tell people it's really a story of 4 young men because the people who put this together. Frank is still, he may just have reached 40, which to me is very young. So he's just 40. Adrian Buckman, our head of design, is still in his sort of early to mid 30s. Will Brackfield, our design, the guy who did most of the legwork on the actual design, is still is just turned 30. And Jorg Bader Jr., Jorg Senior's son, obviously, who heads up our new product development team, bringing all the engineering together with the aesthetics and the supply chain. He's still in his 20s. So this is and it's their efforts and their sort of devotion to delivering something exceptional, even given huge barriers to overcome. It's their triumph, really. And that's the thing that I've enjoyed most of all, is having them receive, the compliments and the flowers, as you might say, for such a gargantuan effort. And, we're very lucky to have, such committed and talented individuals in the business. But, and this is one of those occasions when all of those talents were brought to bear in a single project. So it is a fascinating thing on lots of different levels. It's an important watch for us. Yes, it sells well, but actually it has other ramifications for the business in the way we operate and the confidence it's given some individuals. Will joined us only about 3.5, 4 years ago. His ambition is to become the best watch designer in the world. That's what he said when he joined. He took a pay cut to come to Christopher Ward. He changed his career because he wanted to be the best watch designer in the world. I think he's on his way. I don't think he's there yet, but I think he's on his way. And to have that in a British brand, that sort of talent is encouraging.
What an incredible story, Mike. So many talented people involved, and tears. I've heard tears, and there's still people weeping. Those on the waiting list, probably.
Yeah, there are. Sadly, there are.
I hope not for long.
Well, no, it'll, as I say, it's out to February 24 now. People are having to wait, but we're hopeful we'll be able to, over deliver against the promise, if you like. But we're not going to be hostage to fortune on this. That's for sure.
Well, I see some of the points you've raised there about it wasn't just promoting this watch and this is successful and it helps you as Christopher Ward gain more publicity and more eyeballs. I think it trickles down into what we're here to talk about today, and that's British watchmaking, because it draws eyeballs. And you mentioned MB&F, Legacy Machine. I can see a lot of Arnold & Son. I can see a bit of Armin Strom. I can see anything that has got that classic mix with contemporary.
Yeah,
Beauvais,
spot on.
All these different brands.
Yeah.
But you're doing it at such an inexpensive, figuratively speaking, price point.
Yeah, it's not cheap. I mean, 3,000, is not cheap in anybody's language, but it's compared to anything of its ilk that's gone before, it's, a factor of 10 less and more. So it's, and you're right, it's brought eyeballs onto our brand, and therefore it's bringing eyeballs onto British brands, which is something that...
something you're interested in, isn't it, Mike?
Kind of interested in, and I know you are too, and many people are. Katya, of course, is very passionate and deeply involved in as well, because, since we set up the Alliance of British Watch and Clockmaking, again, a bit like the question you asked, it was about Belcanto. Was there any part of us that thought it might not work? Well, I think, absolutely honestly, and we've Roger and I have said this to you before, Ricky, in previous conversations. Literally, we didn't know if anybody was going to join when we set it. I knew Christopher Ward would, and I knew Roger Smith would, but beyond that, we really didn't know how it would be received. Today, I think, Katya, we've got 78?
Yeah. But we've got the community now of the makers and the club members and the students, and that's great. And we've got new people coming on board.
Well, Katya, do you want to explain to everybody, because this show isn't just going out to members who are already in the club or part of the Alliance. This is going out to the world, and there'll be folks that are learning about the Alliance possibly for the first time, or may think it's a trade-only body, or may think it's going to cost hundreds of pounds to join. So do you want to explain a little bit about it for everybody?
Well, we set up about just over 2 years ago during lockdown, which I think is perfect timing, right, Mike, to set up a new venture.
Couldn't have been better time.
Yeah, but kept us very focused, and like Mike said, nobody knew how well it will be going, but we've got 78 trade members now. They're all British watch and clockmaking companies, and our club membership database is growing every day, and thanks to everyone for support. It's not expensive to join, it's £55 a year, and we've got some nice perks coming with it, like Oracle Time subscription, GMT subscription, and a certificate signed by Mike France and Roger Smith with a special badge designed by Roger Smith. So lots of perks.
I hear there's a waiting list for those certificates.
Yes, mind me reminding Mike too.
I've got a pile on my desk here.
Mike's
just
got
next
about 500 certificates to sign for me, and then he needs to send them off to the Isle of Man to Roger Smith to sign, because we don't just print them, we have them personally signed by both celebrities of the watchmaking world.
Well, you, Roger may count as such. I wouldn't count myself as a celebrity. I think most people think Mike who, but then they see Roger Smith, so that's all right.
Yeah. But we've had an exciting year, and Mike's already mentioned our first collaboration watch, which Mike with Nicholas from Fears Watches have created specially for us to raise funds for the Alliance. Thank you very much. And that was, I know Belcanto was incredibly successful, but Alliance 01 also was quite a successful watch this year, wasn't it, Mike? How long did it take to sell that?
Was it 2 minutes, 13 seconds or something of that?
Yes, it was, it was under 3 minutes,
Under 3 minutes for sure, to sell 50 watches at £4,000 was it was shocking in its way. But again, we also knew, didn't we, Katya, that there was a lot of interest in it. And so it turned out, and there's a waiting list as long as your arm, and there's lots of people who keep contacting me to say, you must have a spare one. You must have. We don't. I think that it's an interesting sort of expression of what the Alliance has become. You mentioned, Katya, that it's become a community, and one of the I suppose surprises really of what's happened since we've forged the Alliance is how willing people are to share stuff, and how interested most of us are in each other, prepared to collaborate about almost anything. And this is a very visible expression, if you like, of that sort of willingness to collaborate on behalf of something bigger than all of us, which is the Alliance. And all of the profits are donated to the Alliance, which is great, because it's a not-for-profit organisation. Some people actually think Roger and I must be getting a load of stuff out of this. Truthfully not. And so it was a joy to be, it's not the first time two watch brands have collaborated, but it's not that common. And but it was a joy to work with Nicholas, who I've known for a long time. And again, for him to be brave enough to allow our designers loose on a watch that we wanted to be an expression of Fears, with a movement provided by us, which is, as I said, the JJ1 jumping out caliber, was just a very brave and adventurous thing to do, and it was just a joy to work with Nicholas over the course of months in the creation of the watch, and delighted that it's been so successful.
Okay, no one's listening, Mike. So what's it actually like working with Nicholas? As much as he's a friend, never work with your friends.
It's really bad.
I thought that,
Ricky. He's a tyrant. Genuinely, now that we're alone, I'd never want to do it again. Never again. Absolute nightmare, the man.
Anyway, back to the show. Not that Nicholas will ever listen to that part. So we got to hear on the sister podcast to this one, we actually had Nicholas and Roger on the show round about the time the launch was about to happen.
Yeah, I remember.
You know what they say? There's his story, your story, and then there's the truth. So he's told us how it worked on his side. What was it like, the design process, and then working with what could in effect be seen as a rival watch company, but is actually a collaborative endeavour?
Yeah, I mean, incredibly, it was really pleasurable, and I think there's no question. The first meeting which we actually had in the room I'm sat in now, and there was myself, there was Nicholas, there was Will, and Adrian. We had some conversations with Nicholas, and he'd given, we'd also done, and the guys had done their background on understanding, the Fierce brand as well as they could, and conversation with Nicholas about how he might see the watch. And they'd gone away and they'd created some 2D renderings, a number of options of design and color. And of course, they literally, I can tell you, I mean, Will and Adrian were genuinely very, very more nervous than I've seen them ever in presenting their ideas, because they're presenting their ideas back to the founder of a brand that they haven't really worked for before, and who is understandably going to be very, very protective about the look of his watch, any watch that's going to come out with the Fears name on it. And so that was a trepidatious moment, it should be said. And the good news was that you could tell almost immediately the relief on firstly Nicholas's face, because as he was being shown these renderings, you could tell, because we thought they looked great, but you could tell that he was absolutely relieved that we hadn't completely ruined his wonderful brand. And then, as with always with these sorts of things, we had a preference ourselves, and the three of us completely were aligned with the preference, both in terms of design and colour. But we presented a number of options.
Did you do that old thing where you've got the one you like and then you made really shit ones?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But good on him. He unfortunately picked the right one. So we all bought into this particular design and colour. And then it was about, the process was always going to be about the details. As you know, it's always there's a lot of detail to resolve in watches. And so that was, and it's quite the level of finishing on the watch, from the case through to, the multi-layered dial, is exceptional. And, a lot of time was spent on the detailing. But my favorite detail of all, which I think, if I'm honest, I think it was Nicholas's idea, is, on the reverse of the lugs, you've got the number and also the Alliance's logo, and Fears and Christopher Ward. And it's just a lovely, lovely touch, and one which I'm quite keen for us to maybe always incorporate that sort of idea into any future Alliance collaboration watch. And indeed, it's not a bad idea to be putting. I've got this idea that all of our future Christopher Ward watches might also have an Alliance stamp on the reverse of one of the lugs. But it was probably more pleasurable than even I or Nicholas thought it was going to be. And and the success that it's had for the Alliance is just icing on the cake, really.
So we had a chat about all the current things happening, which are really exciting. And for the listeners who don't know much about Christopher Ward, and I know, Mike, you've told that story so many times, but how did it all start?
Should we put a time limit on him? We know what he's like. He can run away by himself.
Oh dear. Right, I'll do the short version.
I heard there was a story about a boat.
Yeah, Ricky's never heard this story.
I've never heard the boat story.
Come on, Ricky.
I haven't. You genuinely haven't.
Well, I mean, so the story is a true story. So Peter Ellis, my co-founder, and I had sold Early Learning Centre. And for those who don't know, it was an educational toys business. You can only lie on a beach for so long. So after about a month, completely bored. Believe you have to be. We're on this planet to be productive, are we not? So let's go and do something else. Okay, what are we going to do then? As it happened, an old friend and colleague of mine, Chris Ward, was looking for pastures new. The three of us were on a boat on the Thames, idling down at no more than 6 knots. down the Thames, trying to work out what we were going to do. So, with apologies to Jerome K. Jerome and Three Men in a Boat, we were the 2004 version. This was May 2004. We created a decent sized internet business. We were early adopters of the Internet at Early Learning Centre, and so we figured if you could sell climbing frames online, you could probably sell anything, because back in 2004, people genuinely believed you definitely aren't going to sell a single watch. The number of people who tell me, you've got to be Jim. There's no way on God's earth you're going to sell a watch online. Okay. But then they believed that you wouldn't be selling clothes online back in 2004. So we thought that's unlikely. We did our research, which, we got lucky. There's always luck in all of these things, isn't there? We knew we'd been around long enough even then to know people who knew people who knew people. But a very close friend of ours ran a very large sort of clothing operation in central China. He was Adidas's second largest supplier. Woody Lam, his name was, or is. I hope he's still alive. And Woody had been one of 32 people that the Swiss had brought over from Asia back in the sort of 70s and early 80s to teach them the dark arts of horology. They never did it again. I can't think why. But, and Woody wanted to be a watchmaker, but as the eldest, in his family, his father was a big Taiwanese fabric merchant. As Woody was the eldest son, and when his father died, family business, it was expected that he took it over. So he turned that fabric business into the largest supplier of clothing to Adidas, or second largest supplier of clothing to Adidas in the world. But still collected all of the Mintel reports every year on watches. Still knew loads of people in the industry. And so when we said, "Hi, Woody, we're thinking about going into watches," he said, "Oh, wonderful. I'll send you what I've got." So I ended up surrounded by about 100 Mintel reports, which would have cost me the earth had I decided to buy them, which meant, seriously several months embedded in trying to understand the industry to start with, and then work out where we might best be placed in it.
So what are these reports for people that don't know, myself included?
Mintel is a market research company, and they produce very detailed reports on every single sector of industry several times a year. Truly detailed. I mean, they're often 200 pages thick, and you get to know everything that's in the public domain and sometimes not in the public domain about any sector. Who owns what share, what the average prices are, which territories are the biggest, all of this data. Yeah. And so you can plot your way through if you're of that mind, and get a real handle quite quickly on what's going on in the sector that you previously knew nothing about. So I immersed myself in the watch industry for a couple of months, surrounded by this data, trying to work out how it worked, where there was a gap. And we kind of decided then that, we wanted to go online. Nobody was doing online only. We thought that there was an opportunity for that. Through this research, Woody introduced us to a number of very senior figures in the Asian watch world, working for some major brands, both as suppliers and as retailers. And we got to know first costs. That's because we were friends of Woody. They were opening the books to us. And so we were staggered to learn that, nearly all of the componentry that they were using, we could access. Little old us who never didn't know anything, And B, the second thing we were really staggered to discover was that some of them were multiplying the cost price by a lot.
12.
Well, the most famous example was 34 times.
Whoa.
That wouldn't. Yeah, and that brand, I won't name the brand because they'll probably sue me, but that brand is still around and still A, claiming it's all Swiss made, and B, that they're value for money. And we thought, well, actually, we were three, working class northern lads, really, with our mothers on our shoulders, going, how much are Michael? If I bought a TV set that was more than how much you pay for that? Yeah. So we decided that the gap here to do something different was to utilize this componentry, but actually apply just a regular retail margin, which is 3 times. And because we weren't going through a wholesale model, we would be at least half the price of anything equivalent, and often a quarter or a fifth or an even bigger, a smaller fraction. And so that was what we decided to do. There were two choices. We wanted it to be online. We wanted it to have global reach. We didn't. We wanted it to be easy to move around the world. So sofas was out. And it had to be something that we were interested in. And jewelry fitted the bill, but the others weren't in touch with their feminine side. So that was out. But all of us had at different levels a real interest in watches. And so we decided that watches was what it was going to be.
When you sat on the boat, do you remember what watches you had on?
I would have had on, because my particular passion at the time was IWC. And I had one of their pilot, actually it was a Spitfire 15 watch on, which I've still got 38 mil on, which I still think is an absolute classic and still informs much of the view we have about design, which has to have a certain clarity about it. They've been through their travails like everybody else over the years, IWC, but at their best, I still think they're one of the brands that cuts through and produces clarity in their design. And I've always loved their watches, and still do. I think they're about to release something very interesting, aren't they?
NDAs.
Yeah. I know what it is, but I'm probably not supposed to know. No. But I do know what it is. Someone was indiscreet. So, which will turn out to be good news for us, I think. Our very next launch might be something not dissimilar. And I think the noise around this particular type of watch is going to be loud because the IWC might be doing something similar, or they may not, depending on what you've signed.
That's a great story, Mike, especially for some young brands that are just starting up in Britain. We've got quite a few of them starting up, and I think they should all listen to your story because you started completely from scratch. You know, you've got like a Christopher Wood pot, and you've done your research, which I know is your tagline in the company.
It's our line, yeah.
The reports. And then you've found the niche market. And what else is in the pot?
I don't know. I think the only advice I ever give to anybody, and as you say, Katya, we've got some. I mean, I think we've got some amazing young talent in the British watch industry, and they put us to shame. Frankly, they're far smarter than we ever were. But the only advice I ever give them is, particularly in the watch industry, there are two pieces really. One is make sure you've got enough cash.
Yeah.
Because, the reality is this is not an industry for the faint-hearted. It's a very cash-intensive, working capital-intensive. Certainly in the early days, many brands who've got great ideas go under because they run out of cash. So be well-financed. And if you think you're well-financed, you're not double or treble what you think you is good, and then you'll be probably okay. The second thing that I offer people, and this is really for the next stage of their development, is I think you have to invest in real expertise. You know, the three of us could literally get on a flight out to Switzerland tomorrow, go to a sort of an OEM company. There are two or three, say Rowenta is one of the bigger ones. If we had a good idea for a watch or a watch brand, through them bring to life watches. And I think that's a great way to start. And so the barriers to entry these days are much lower than they used to be. But if you're going to move beyond the micro level, and my passion is for the industry to grow and grow and grow. We have what we call, as you know, Katya, Project 1 billion, which is we are determined to do our little bit to help the British watch industry reach £1 billion turnover, within a kind of a 10-year time frame. And it's starting from around about 125, 150 million now. So there's a way to go. But to do that, you have to think big. You have to, not just be in this as a lifestyle. You have to want to, some of these brands, not all of them, but some brands have to go mainstream. And to do that, I think you have to outgrow your micro brand status. And to outgrow your micro brand status, you need genuine watchmaking expertise. And so when you can, if you haven't already got it, my advice to people is if you want to get to the next stage, invest in expertise.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons you and Roger got your heads together, because it wasn't just to sell more watches from the brands that exist here in the UK. It was to get the employment levels up, the education levels up, and to have homegrown talent. So can you tell us the history of how the alliance came to be now that we know how Christopher Ward came to be?
Sure. It was Roger and I had known each other for a good while. Yeah, more of, we're talking about in Roger, and he'll be embarrassed because he will listen to this, but so I know I'll embarrass him. But, we are talking about one of the, if not the greatest living watchmaker.
Did he ever tell you the story about how he crashed his CNC machine and broke all the tools and stuff?
He did, actually. It's not always plain sailing, is it? But, he's developed ultimately into one of, if not the world's greatest watchmaker. But if I have any skills, they're sort of, in a different arena. But somehow we always connected. It was a chance meeting at the very last Salon QP. We bumped into each other, and he and I, through different meetings and knowledge of different parts of the industry, knew that there was something going on in the British watch sector that definitely wasn't being represented in this show. It was a really dispiriting, disheartening show. It was the entrails of Salon QP, if you like. I think it was the last one. This was 2018, November 2018. And we just said, look, this can't be the best of Britain. We should do something about it. We just said, yeah, let's do something about it. We had no idea what that was going to be at that stage. Went away. Roger contacted Katya's husband, Alistair Rawdsley. And probably a couple of months later, in January or February of 2019, I think it was Alistair who'd sort of come up with the idea that what we needed was a trade body of sorts, that was something concrete that cemented things together. And I thought that, and Roger thought, was that an excellent idea? How do you set up a trade body? Who knows? So we pulled in a few favors from people we knew, did our research. Alistair did a lot of background work, and the idea for the alliance formed. And what we wanted it to be from the very outset was something forward-looking. Everybody knows the history of and the heritage of British watchmaking. And a lot of it is looking back, and we should be very proud and are very proud of that heritage, of course. But there was nothing really looking forward that was looking to promote and grow the industry in this country. And yet we knew that there were some really talented individuals, doing some amazing things, but there was no connectivity. So the idea of having something that enabled connections to be made. I'm a great believer, I know Roger and Alistair and Katya as well. I just believe that if you put people together and there is a genuine, in an appropriate way, with an appropriate vision, and a shared a shared interest, things happen when the right people are together talking the right things. So at the very simplest level, it's back to Katya's phrase of community. Yes, it's a trade body, and yes, we have a seat in government now, and the voice of our industry can be heard at the highest tables, and that's really powerful. But at its very base level and its very core, it's about putting like-minded individuals together with a common cause. And if those people are genuine, and so many people in this industry, one of the beauties about the watch industry in this country is the authenticity and the genuineness of the people in it. It's incredible. And I've been in some, let's not talk about the fashion industry. This is very unusual in my experience, this sort of the camaraderie that exists if you put people together, and the sort of stuff that spins off that. And so that was, really important to us. Then was this, well, how do we promote it? How do we grow it? And that's about giving it a voice. It's about making the world understand what's going on, letting the British government realize, because they didn't, by the way, that there was something called the British watch. They had no idea. They did not know there was an industry in this country. They thought it died in sort of 1822. It's about people. All businesses, all industries are ultimately about people, and it's about talent. And our aim is to try and attract the brightest and the best into this industry. And the only way you're going to do that is demonstrating a strong future, and demonstrating to all of these bright people, whether they're coming out of Birmingham City University with horology degrees, or, just done a PP at Oxford and are interested in coming into marketing. It doesn't really, the watch industry is broad. It's not just about watchmaking. It's all sectors. If you're going to grow it, you've got to attract the brightest and the best. And so it's important that it's promoted, that we have a voice. It's important that people listen to these sorts of podcasts. It's important that people like you, Ricky, which is what you do, you promote it, across the world, so that people are absolutely aware that this is a thriving, growing, forward-thinking sector with loads of opportunities. And if no matter who you are, if you're talented, it's well worth looking at. And if we can get that sort of message across and attract increasing numbers, and we are doing, by the way, increasing numbers of talented people, then, the future, given the innovativeness of the British psyche, look what we've done in Formula One. No, we're not the biggest players in the automotive industry, but my God, we're leading the technological charge in the automotive industry because of Formula One. And I have a personal view that that's possibly, hopefully, where we will, as a nation, take the lead again. That I just think that we have capacity within ourselves as a nation. We're both entrepreneurial and we're both true innovators and engineers. And engineering innovation is something that we have always been supreme at. It just needs to be translated again back into the watches. And there are aspects of that happening. It's popping off all over the place in the watch sector. So it's a really, really exciting time to be involved in something. And it's always exciting to be involved in things that grow. And I suppose at the very simplest level, things grow in the sunlight, and the Alliance is just shining some sunlight onto British watch and clockmaking.
It's a massive magnifying glass. Before you guys launched, which actually launched on the sister podcast to this over 2 years ago, there were brands that even I didn't know, and I was entrenched in this as a hobby to start with before it became my career. And you guys have just constantly shone the light on different organisations I didn't know exist. I know the next episode that's coming out, should we tell people who that's going to be, Katja?
We've got an amazing company from Cambridge called Bowcroft Watches, and we're going to be talking to Matt and Karim of how they've started the business and their wonderful plans for the future.
I believe there's a boat story involved in that as well.
Yes, there's a boat story as well. Yeah.
All good companies have boat stories involved in them.
A bit narrower river, but
Perhaps, yeah.
So let's get to know Mike a little bit. I've got a couple of personal questions.
Oh my goodness. How personal.
Oh, no, too personal. So you obviously have big passion for watches, but what else are you passionate about? Could it be by any chance football?
Well, football is certainly one of my passions, and you have to be passionate to be an Evertonian these days. My father took me to my first game when I was 3 years of age. So I'm a lifelong Evertonian. And that could be quite difficult at times. Other passions that I've got are I'm really into my music,
drum and bass,
obviously, cool. and electro dance, etc. I'm sure Bob Dylan is going to bring out a drum and bass electro album at some point in his life. Big Dylan fan. I started. This is me being different to my mates at school. You won't remember this. You might, but we all used to go to school with LPs as they were then.
I know. I'm from the Soviet Union, yeah.
And everybody was sort of into Led Zeppelin and all that when I was at school. And I went a different path. I discovered West Coast America. And so the early Americana stuff. And I was really into the Byrds, which led me to Dylan, which led me to Crosby, Stills, Nash, and then Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, and Graham Parsons and Linda Ronstadt, who, by the way, is having a moment again now, Linda Ronstadt. So I started my life sort of on the West Coast of America, and then went down into Nashville, if you will. So music is a big passion of mine.
Very Steve Jobsy of you.
Is that right?
Yeah, he was into very similar taste in music.
Oh, I didn't realise that. And then I suppose outside of that,
Aston Martin.
I do like my cars, and I'm a very lucky boy in that I have an Aston Martin DB9, which, as I always say to people, if it didn't have an engine in it, I could lift it. I'd put it on the wall, because I still think. And I've become a little disappointed with the direction Aston Martin have gone in. I always say, and this, for me, Aston Martin lost its way the moment it put Aston Martin on the boot. Aston Martin didn't need to put its name on a car. It just had its badge, and now it has Aston Martin on it. And I thought, no, you've misunderstood. Whoever's in charge of Aston Martin misunderstands the brand now. But for me, the last most beautiful Aston Martin was the DB9, and it inspired our light catcher case, as Ricky probably remembers. So I owe it quite a lot anyway, but I do love it.
Well, that is the end of the show. And for the folks that aren't already members of the Alliance, I'm pretty sure they're now very keen, both trade and club. So for the people that are perhaps thinking of starting a watch company, getting involved, or have been in the business for a little while and want to get involved with the Alliance, as far as I'm aware, there's not a charge, but how should people approach you to get involved in this, Katja?
Well, you can just go on our website. If you want to join as a club member, there's a very easy process to do that. Just email us there. If you want to join as a trade member, it's free if you're registered in the UK.
It's also worth saying that students of horology, it's also free to them to be club members. And it's fantastic that we've got so many students who've signed up, but the more the merrier. Back to what we were talking about, getting talent interested and involved in British watchmaking. It's completely free of charge to students.
And as we said earlier on, it's not hundreds of pounds per year for a membership. It's only £55, and you get an annual subscription to Oracle Time, which is a fantastic publication if you don't already know about it. You get a free digital subscription to GMT, plus lots of other things coming down the line. I believe you had to be a member to actually buy the limited edition watch.
Yes, that's correct. We've got our next collaboration watch lined up as well, which we can't talk about who that is, but we know who it's going to be. And we're very excited. Can't wait to see what it's going to look like. And you will also need to be our club member to be able to purchase it.
You're going to be very excited by the next collaboration, Ricky. You are.
I hope I'm about to find out when I press the stop button on my recorder. Well, thanks for tuning in and listening. And yeah, be sure to check in next month when we have got the chaps from Bowcroft Watches on. Thanks a lot, and we'll speak to you soon.
Goodbye.
Bye now.